back to the Recovering Out Loud podcast. Today we have a very special guest with us named Betsy Craft. She's a peer supporter with a harm reduction lens who specializes in community engagement at the intersection of research and anti-carceral drug policy advocacy. How are you, Betsy?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Charles.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Excited to talk with you. Can you tell us a little more about what you do?
Yeah, sure. I kind of do a lot of different things right now. So my background is in peer support, and I got into that back in 2020. Um, really, I feel like there was a lot that happened in 2020 with the murder of George Floyd, and we had the pandemic happening, and I myself had just experienced homelessness not that long before that. So I was out on the streets in like 2018, 2019, and so throughout that, or well, let me back up. I had previously been working in like corporate finance, corporate cannabis, and when 2020 happened, it was a big shift, I feel like, in our country. And for me, having experienced homelessness like the year before, I just wanted to do more for my community. And I had seen this job posting for the first safe outdoor space, and actually it was Lisa Rayville with the Harm Reduction Action Center who had sent it to me and said, hey, you should apply for this, like you would be good at that. And I was like, really, me? um but I'm really glad I did it. Like, that's when I made the career change into peer support, and got to work on a team and helped open the first safe outdoor space in Denver. And then that turned into a job with the Colorado Village Collaborative and working in the tiny homes. Um, and then that, turned into another role with the city of Denver, with the Office of the Municipal Public Defender, working in the jails, doing peer support. And I'm just so grateful that I had those experiences, because I feel like it's really allowed me the opportunity to connect with folks in a deeper way, and also learn a skill set in peer support, and be able to support folks.
So, Betsy, I noticed in your title, it says you work at the intersection of research and anti carceral drug policy advocacy. That sounds really interesting. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Charles. Yeah, I feel like I honestly never really pictured myself working in research either, but it was about 4 years ago that while working in the tiny home villages, that there was a community engaged project around, and it was led by an anthropologist named, his name is Marty Otanes, and he was looking for people with living and lived experience who had experienced a non-fatal overdose to share their stories. And so I got to be one of 76 people across Colorado who shared my non-fatal overdose story, because I am an overdose survivor. And that project just opened a lot of doors. I also supported with, because it was a project that was all around Colorado, and so um, like a lot of our folks at the tiny home village, participated, and I mean all across Colorado, from the western slope to the mountains. And it was a project to destigmatize overdose and substance use. And then that turned into an opportunity to go to the National Harm Reduction Conference in Puerto Rico in 2022 and present about the project. And so it was at that conference that I sat in on this presentation called it was about community-based participatory research. And I just remember this researcher saying, don't be afraid to involve people with living and lived experience on research teams, not just as participants, but, leading, project management and recruitment and engagement and facilitation of focus groups and, the dissemination process. And so when I got back from Puerto Rico, there was an opportunity to be on a community advisory board for the Worth program, which is a program through the University of Colorado that connects people coming from incarceration to trauma-informed medical care. And that was a really eye-opening experience and just a really cool experience to connect with other folks, with incarceration lived experience and get connected to a lot of different professional development opportunities. Shout out, Megan Robbins and the Worth team, because it was through that I then learned about these other research opportunities, and again was a participant, and one of which was, looking at factors that increase overdose post incarceration. And a lot of my overdoses happened, leaving incarceration. And so that was something I was really drawn to. And when the study wrapped up, it was with the Missing Us team at the University of Colorado. I asked if there was any opportunities for someone like myself to be involved more. And so that turned into a role as a community engagement consultant. And I've been working on this study with the research team, and it's led by Dr. Catherine Lemasters. She's the principal investigator on the qualitative arm of the study. It's linked to HB 22-1326, the House bill that felonized fentanyl in 2022. And so part of that bill, they said that there was an amendment that said that you must study the impact of the bill. And so that's what we've been doing for the past year.
Nice. That sounds fascinating. Wow. I'm really glad to hear that you're doing that kind of work. I feel like, um, you know, uh, th- these kinds of things have been a problem for a long time, right? But they've always sort of been swept under the rug, and now they can't be any longer. And we need people to be doing that kind of work to truly find lasting solutions to some of these issues. So, Betsy, you also served on the advisory board of the Colorado Drug Policy Coalition. That sounds interesting. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. Thanks for asking about that. So the Colorado Drug Policy Coalition it was formed when the Overdose Prevention Center bill came out in 2023. So it was House Bill 23-1202. And really, we're a coalition that is fighting for anti-carceral drug policies and rooted in evidence-based practice and science and data-driven. And so really we're advocating to save lives from preventable overdoses um, and decarceration.
Yeah. Wow. I think that's so important. I mean, to be able to approach this issue from an anti-carceral point of view. I mean, it kind of reminds me, honestly, of the approach that Portugal took back in 2001 for their. I think at the time it was like 1% of their entire population was addicted to heroin or something like that, and it's just fascinating because the way that they rallied around that problem, and got a panel of doctors and all kinds of different people and said, how do we truly fix this, right? And they came back and laid out a really solid plan that included, microloans for addicts, right? It included, all kinds of, like, if you were hired at a garage to be a mechanic and you were in recovery, the government would pay like half your wages, right? So you'd be more attractive as an employee as well. And I think that that's a really important approach, to view it more as, a mental health issue, right? More as a health issue
Mhm.
than, an actual like legal issue, because we've tried that. We've been doing that. It does not work. It doesn't help. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you guys are, really working in those areas and really pushing those concepts, because I feel like that's the only way that we're going to see progress, because that's really the only way that we've seen it outside the US too, with that Portugal model. Um, so yeah, I'm glad you do that work. That's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, no, thank you. I feel it's we've got folks, dying every day. Um, people right now, like you said, I mean, we've got people dying in public places and Starbucks bathrooms and on the sidewalk. And we actually have the overdose prevention center bill in the Senate tomorrow.
Wow, awesome.
So um, the bill is called HB 241028, and it's really local control for municipalities. So it says that each individual jurisdiction will have the authority to decide if they want to implement an overdose prevention center in their municipality. And really what that is um, a safe place for people to go and bring in pre-obtained drugs and use them in the presence of medically trained staff. And in the event of an overdose, they would be have their lives saved. And also there would be opportunity to get connected to, treatment resources and different substance use resources to help them. So I feel like this is like a really effective model, just given like my own experience of being unhoused and, having the Harm Reduction Action Center be the only place that would really allow me in and treat me like a human being. And, like I said, like they also connected me to my first job, like after I had been experiencing homelessness in 2018, 2019. And really that turned into my career and peer support. And so I feel like from my own experience, if I was going to access an overdose prevention center, that would be the place where I would get my resources for treatment or for counseling or for, STI testing. Um, Really, I mean, anything. I mean, job referrals, like um, and I feel like we need to maximize the resources at our local syringe exchanges and allow them the ability to implement an overdose prevention center so that we can save lives. And like you mentioned, like what we're doing is not working. And I mean, it's just, it's like our friends and family and community members. And like something I always say when I'm advocating at the Capitol is that, excuse me, like a few years ago, I was the girl that you like walked past on the sidewalk, sleeping on a cardboard box. And, here I am today. And like, I don't have any more or less value than I did then than I do now. and we don't get to pick and choose, who we save or who's worthy of saving. Like, we're all worth saving, and we all, just need community and unconditional love and access to dignified treatment options. And not everybody recovers the same way, and not everybody wants to be sober, like not everybody, um, not everybody is able to achieve abstinence. Like, I'm one of those people. Like, I um did that a lot in my life, where I've, had periods of abstinence, but I've also completed 9 different treatment centers. I've been pretty much in and out of incarceration for the past almost 20 years, and on probation for the past almost 20 years, from like 2006 until like 2021. I just don't agree with the mindset that like success is like days, years, months away from a last use. And because like if that was the case, like I would be, you know, I would be identifying as like a failure, and so, and I don't feel like my life is a failure. Um I graduated college last year. I became a homeowner, and I'm a person
Congrats.
who uses drugs. Like, I feel like I got to a place in my life where I felt safe in exploring my relationship with different substances, and that was a personal decision, and I accredit my ability to do that to harm reduction and my harm reduction community. And now that's what I lead with. I lead with it's called liberatory harm reduction, and like it's rooted in the idea that people who use drugs, we're the experts in ourselves, and we are the ones that are saving each other's lives. It's friends of drug users that are saving the most lives. It's not law enforcement, it's not paramedics. It is literally people who use drugs. And if you look at the box of Narcan, like everything on the side of it was all crafted from the voices of people who use drugs. And and so that's just something I feel really strongly about, is giving us taking our power back, and allowing us to be a part of the conversation. We're not going to incarcerate or criminalize our way out of this overdose crisis. Um, we're going to get there through listening to people who use drugs as the experts, and really leaning into them, and like trusting, and showing unconditional love and just compassion. It's about creating a compassionate culture around the fact that we are in a really trying time. I feel like, we're living in a genocide right now. There's a genocide happening, and it's been happening, since October. And I feel like there's a lot of correlation with just the way that our country was formed. And that's like probably a whole nother topic, but I just feel like that's why I root for, the underdog, the people that are the most oppressed. And I feel like me being a white woman and being a survivor of the war on drugs, like I would have a DOC number if I was living in a black or brown body. And so I feel like it's my duty, making it out and being a survivor, to uplift and amplify the voices of the most oppressed.
Well, congratulations on reclaiming your life, and I know that for a lot of people, it can be incredibly difficult to do that, you know. And I think part of this journey that we all go through is figuring out what our life truly is, right? Does it involve abstinence? Does it not? Does it involve, I mean, there's all kinds of different options, because you're right. The reality is that, you know, no two people recover in the same way, you know? And I think it's important for people to know that there's a lot of different ways to live. There's a lot of different ways to reclaim life and to come to a good positive place in our life where we're happy, we're fulfilled, we're doing well, helping others, all that kind of stuff. So, I think that that's a very very important side to all this. And um, I wanted to also touch on the you mentioned in our pre-show meeting. You mentioned what does it mean to be a peer supporter with a harm reduction lens? I think that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I feel like it's for me, um, you know, one of the things about peer support is that we have to take ourselves out of it and really center the person that we're working with. And so my job is to listen first and foremost and provide support. And I think that's why, like, a lot of times when we when we mix peer support with these like capitalistic structures and like systems, sometimes it becomes more about like how many resources did you connect them to, and what amount of time. And it's, at least that's how it was like for me working in the city. It was all about the number of resources and like how many people can you work with, and um, versus like the quality of the care and support that I was able to deliver. And so I feel like, I mean, that's part of it, right? Like I truly feel that if somebody that I'm working with inside the jail after a few months just feels like a tad bit more listened to or heard or respected or supported, like that's really what um that's really my you know goal, or like that. I feel like that's um what's important to me. um but also too, it's about this idea that my own story is not at all like what I'm trying to push onto someone else. Like I think sometimes we can get mixed up with do unto others as we would have done unto ourselves, and like that just doesn't fit in the peer support model, because what I would want done unto me may not be what you want. And so, therefore, I need to take myself out of it and just really listen to what you need, and provide you with options, and support you along the way. And so, if that looks like abstinence, if that looks like treatment, if that looks like us working together in a peer support capacity, and helping connect you to employment resources, or maybe it's housing.
No, I love what you're talking about because I think that it's very much about, meeting people where they're at, and I think that sometimes that can look like a lot of different things, like you're talking about, and recognizing that, people are in different places, people need different things. Like, for example, I've had guys that I've worked with in the past who very much that they only want one particular thing from me, assistance wise, right? Whatever that might be. But they don't necessarily want to look at the recovery portion as a whole. They don't necessarily want to look at this or that or whatever, you know? And it's my job to meet them where they're at, to help them through whatever chaos they're currently experiencing. And, I can also plant seeds along the way. I can also show them, through action and through experience that, hey, I've found personally a different way to live that works for me. Maybe you can find one that works for you, and then exploring some different options and finding different tools and opening them up to, art therapy or this or that. And, as men, sometimes it can be difficult to be vulnerable and to open up and to trust and allow people in and all that. So I feel like there's a lot of different layers there that as we start to explore those, it can really be a very eye-opening experience for people, and they can learn a lot about themselves. Like, I'm a very, very different person today than I was in my active addiction. And, I take pride in that, because the only thing that scares me today is not changing. I want to change constantly, and I think I find strength in that. And I hear a lot of strength in what you're saying as well in your story too. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing your story, some of your story as well. I feel like that's what is so beautiful about this is that we get to define that for ourselves, and it's really truly going to take all of us. And thankfully we don't, all recover or, find our way on this, what I say is like a self-discovery journey, in the same way. And there's just so many different intersections of, well, especially, harm reduction. Like there's, like I feel like it's kind of hard to talk about harm reduction without talking about like the history of it and like the history of the movement and how it's really centered and rooted in, drug users and sex workers and trans activists and, people surviving these systems of oppression. And it's like it's people supporting people, and I feel like that's why it's so interesting right now. It's like we're at this juncture where, our government is not doing anything to help us save lives. And that's why, I mean, I feel like we're at a point where we really need overdose prevention centers, or we're just going to continue to see people continuing to die from preventable deaths. And um, I think if there's just, one thing that I could just really lead with, it's that people, people don't need to, people don't need to, people don't need to die alone in bathrooms or alone in subways or train stations or out on the street. We have an evidence-based tool, an evidence-based practice. It's one of the many different tools that we know works. And like they say, like 80% of people relapse within their first year of completing treatment, and that's a very real statistic. I've relapsed a million times, and thankfully, survived over like 12 overdoses. But like we wouldn't, if it wasn't for, me, like just learning to love myself unconditionally as the person I am, all my flaws and all, then and finding a community, I feel like we could do better with, I think right now we're at an intersection of like there's kind of this us versus them thing in the recovery and harm reduction lenses. But I hope that in the near future we can, mend that a little better and come up with some shared language that really is inclusive and helps people feel seen, heard, and respected and valued for their decision and how they choose to recover. Because, unfortunately, that is still an issue. If we're just going to name it, I mean, I've experienced it. Like people say, oh no, you can be in recovery, like if you're on MOUD or um if you like use cannabis or something like that. But then it seems like they always want to follow it up with but oh, you shouldn't be on the maximum dosage after 2 years, you got to be tapering down. And it's like, well, why would you have an opinion about that if you say, I don't know. Maybe that's
No,
going off on a tangent too much, but
that's the beauty of the show. We go wherever we want.
thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you're right. I think that it is about, finding what works for us. And I think that, the cookie cutter approach of abstinence, work a set of steps, or else kind of thing, I don't think that that fits everybody. Like I've worked with guys in the past who are super triggered by meetings. They go in there and they hear stuff that they don't want to hear ever again. So I mean, it's and not to say that that's not a helpful tool. I believe in all of the tools being helpful because I think that there is a tool that fits everyone out there. It's just about which one is it, and I think you're right. I think the more that we can come together as a unified group with the sole cause of improving the quality of life for people, whatever that looks like, you know, because who am I to say, oh, that's not an improved quality of life because it's a different kind of recovery than mine? That doesn't work. That doesn't make sense. That's a very unhuman approach to it, and I
Right.
think it's about acceptance in saying, that we're all here in a, you know unconditional kind of way of support and moving in a direction and just growth, and so I really like hearing all of these all these point of views, and I hope that our listeners, I hope you guys really attach yourselves with some of these different views and formulate your own recovery. See
Mhm.
what works for you. Because if you've banged your head against the wall 100 times at a bunch of different treatment centers and it's not working, try something different. Maybe it's not about sitting and listening to the content and saying, "Oh, I'm not going to listen anymore because I heard it at the past 8 treatment centers." Maybe it's about instead, okay, now I have this information. What do I do with it in the middle of a triggered state? What do I do when I have a strong craving? Which tool do I rely on? Right? Where can I pull from? What experience can I use? I think that's the hard part. In the middle of one of those situations, having a logical thought followed up by action. So practicing that kind of stuff. I think if you go to a treatment center again, for example, bring that up. Say, hey, you know what? I've been to 10 of these, right? And I'm starting to lose hope. But I want to know how to use tools. I want to know how to apply them to real life situations. That's the hard part for me, and I think being able to, again, customize your recovery like that for yourself to make it
Mhm.
work for you and where you're at and where it's difficult for you. I think, that's the goal.
Totally. Totally. I always tell people, like, I don't celebrate any kind of time except alive time. It's just not, for me, it's just so much more than if I'm using or not using. It's about loving myself even after I use. It's like we're choosing to practice, safe use and making sure that I'm not using alone, or making sure that I'm not like testing substances, and just being connected to a community that we can be honest with. Like, I feel like sometimes, at least for me, like in the abstinence based recovery community, sometimes it felt like there was just so much stigma around relapse that people were afraid to come forward and say, I used. And like, we know people use, like, I feel like there's no other behavioral disorder, if you want to call it that, that like just really shames people for a return to use. Like, we don't treat people that, for instance, like, I heard this analogy with one of the doctors at the Capitol that, like, if you were, had a severe health, like heart issues, and you were told, to not eat steak, because one more steak could cause you an artery, or clogged artery, or it could be another stent in your, or it could be, open heart surgery. Like, we don't lock people in cages for having, another steak when they were told that one more steak could kill you.
Hmm.
We don't
Yeah.
mandate no steak. Like it
Right.
just sounds absurd, right?
Yeah, it
But
does.
yeah, we mandate people to go to jail or prison for having substance use disorder, and our jails and prisons have become the de facto mental health treatment facility when they're not equipped. They're not equipped. Nobody heals in a cage. Nobody gets better being treated like they're not human, like you said before. And so I feel like we really need to do better and stop. There's so many people that need and want treatment right now, but yet we're fighting bills all legislative session that mandate treatment. Like, luckily, those bills didn't make it out of the House. But I mean, the fact that our legislators are still bringing those bills when we have 50 years of evidence showing that incarceration doesn't work for people with substance use disorder, it's like, why are we doing this? Like, why aren't we putting this time, resources, energy into creating more beds, voluntary beds, or creating more pathways for harm reduction, peer support, post release incarceration, so that, I mean, we can't even get peers into the jail. Like, I lead a subcommittee with the Colorado Consortium that's advancing the peer support workforce in carceral facilities, because so many of our workforce is denied entrance, and there is no objective, transparent policy that states, this is what you need to be allowed to work inside carceral facilities. And so I just didn't know that when I worked with the, municipal public defender's office and had access to the jail, um, like, as an extension of an attorney. Therefore, like, I didn't have recorded visits. Like, I didn't know that that was like unheard of, and that so many of my colleagues are denied and not told even why. And it's like, I mean, overdose is one of the leading causes of death inside jails. Peers would love to do. We would love to have a robust, peer led overdose education, naloxone distribution program inside the jails. And that's something we should be doing. That's one of our expertise. And so, and then, overdose is also the leading cause of death within the first 2 weeks of leaving incarceration. So it's like, well, why are we still putting people in jails that have substance use disorder if they're dying in the jails? We're not saving them, and they're dying when they're coming out. Like, why? Like, that just doesn't seem like a very, um, it doesn't, it really baffles me. I don't understand it. Why we keep doing something that is just not working, and really people are dying, and these are good people.
Yeah.
They're our friends, our loved ones.
Well, I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and I'm really glad we're able to have this conversation today. And um, for our listeners out there, if you have any comments or questions or anything, leave them below, because we want this to be an open dialogue. For too long, all of these things have been swept under the rug, or labeled as, you know all kinds of different negative things, right? But the reality is here, and we can't arrest our way out of it. So it's time to find a different solution. And I hope that all of you listening out there have, had a new side of this issue brought to light for you. And I hope that it inspires some new thought and action. So thank you for coming on today, Betsy. Appreciate talking with you.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks. Until next time.
Sounds good.